The Oscar nominations are out. Let's talk about the surprising inclusions, the surprising exclusions, and the Emilia Pérez of it all right now. Hello everybody, I'm Dan Murrell here with my reaction and breakdown of the Academy Award nominations, which were announced very early this morning by Rachel Sennett and Bowen Yang. In a year where it seemed like there was the potential for a lot of surprise, I guess the biggest surprise was the lack of major surprises. There were a lot of long shot contenders that it seemed like could sneak in that ultimately didn't. That doesn't mean, though, that the nominations were completely devoid of eyebrow-raising moments, and perhaps the most eyebrow-raising moment is the movie that walked away with the most nominations. Emilia Pérez was, as expected, I guess, the leader in Oscar nominations, but it racked up 13 nominations, which is one less than the all-time record set by All About Eve, Titanic, and La La Land. To put that into context, Oppenheimer last year had 13 nominations, and other movies like Fellowship of the Ring and Chicago, Forrest Gump, Gone with the Wind, all also received 13 nominations. So the Academy made the decision to not just nominate Emilia Pérez for a bunch of awards, but to put it up in the pantheon of the all-time greats. And we'll talk about that later. But let's start breaking down the nominations category by category, and we'll start with Best Supporting Actress. The nominees were Monica Barbaro in A Complete Unknown. She came on strong as the movie started to really apparently resonate with awards voters. I'm surprised that she was the supporting performance that they gravitated towards, but she makes the cut. Ariana Grande for Wicked was nominated as expected, along with Felicity Jones for The Brutalist, who some thought, including myself, could be fading a bit, but she gets the Academy Award nomination. Isabella Rossellini for Conclave, and Zoe Saldana for Emilia Pérez. Margaret Qualley, not on the list. That's disappointing for me on a personal level. Danielle Deadwyler, also not nominated after being looked over a couple of years ago for the movie Till. Again, no major surprises here. I am bummed out that Margaret Qualley didn't make the cut because I thought that she was great in The Substance. When we're talking about my personal predictions, I went 4 out of 5 on these. I went for what I called the chaos bracket and had Jamie Lee Curtis getting the nomination for The Last Showgirl. She did not get that nomination, but still 4 out of 5 in a category as up in the air as this one. I'll take it. For Best Supporting Actor, the nominees were Yura Borisov for Anora, Kieran Culkin for A Real Pain, Edward Norton for A Complete Unknown, Guy Pearce for The Brutalist, and Jeremy Strong for The Apprentice. Again, no major surprises here. In my personal nominations, I went 4 out of 5 because I bought into the whole idea that The Brutalist was fading down the backstretch, but Guy Pearce does get the nomination. I'm very happy because I thought that he was great in the movie. Clarence Macklin was the actor who I put in my list of final nominees instead of Guy Pearce. He does not get that nomination. And Sing Sing in general, we'll talk about it, didn't have the best Oscar morning. I think there are a lot of angry calls that should be made to A24 and their strategy on this film. Interesting that Denzel Washington didn't make the cut, only because before Gladiator 2 came out and then right after it, he was considered by many to be a lock for a Best Supporting Actor nomination. But Gladiator 2 really faded down the backstretch. Again, I think because it didn't really measure up to the reception of the first film. In the Best Actor race, the nominees are Adrian Brody for The Brutalist, Timothée Chalamet for A Complete Unknown, Coleman Domingo for Sing Sing, Ralph Fiennes for Conclave, and Sebastian Stan for The Apprentice. Daniel Craig did not make the cut for Queer. He was considered by many to be sort of filling out that 5th spot. I'm personally very happy that Sebastian Stan made the cut because I think that he had a great year last year. He had 2 great lead performances in The Apprentice and A Different Man. I liked A Different Man as a movie a lot more, but I can't deny that Sebastian Stan was great in The Apprentice. He came on strong toward the end. I actually went 5 out of 5 on my predictions for Best Actor because I thought that he might sneak in there and get that 5th spot. And this is a very strong category. Some people say that maybe Adrian Brody has it down. I don't know. There's a lot of wiggle room here. For Best Actress, the nominees were Cynthia Erivo for Wicked, Carla Sofia Gascon for Emilia Pérez, Mikey Madison for Anora, Demi Moore for The Substance, and Fernanda Torres, who makes the cut for I'm Still Here. She, I think, really started closing the gap after the Golden Globes. I think perhaps the delay in voting and the nominations may have helped to clinch that number 5 spot for her. And this was a very strong category. Marianne Jean-Baptiste, Nicole Kidman, Pamela Anderson, Angelina Jolie, all, I think, were in contention for that spot, but Fernando Torres comes in, and Mikey Madison, I think you might say, is the front runner amongst these nominees, but even more than the Best Actor race, I really don't know who's going to win here because every one of these nominees has their own narrative in one way or another. I think this is a wide open field. Saoirse Ronan and Amy Adams are two early frontrunners for their roles in The Outrun and Night Bitch, who did not end up making the cut. It just goes to show you that early Oscar buzz in the fall doesn't always translate to a nomination, and I'm happy to say that on my personal predictions, I went 5 out of 5 in this category as well. The nominees for Best Director are Sean Baker for Anora, Brady Corbet for The Brutalist, James Mangold for A Complete Unknown, Jacques Audiard for Emilia Pérez, and Coralie Farge for The Substance. James Mangold does make it in. I predicted that he would, although I also predicted that the Academy would choose to leave Coralie Farge out of the category. Instead, Edward Berger does not make it for Conclave. But the big thing here for me is that Denis Villeneuve was not nominated. A lot of people saw this coming, and now he has not been nominated for Best Director for either the first or the second Dune movie, which to me is just bananas. I don't know what more you need to do as a director to get a nomination. Is it vision? Is it scope? Is it the technical aspect? Is it the acting? He hits a 10 out of 10 on all of those for me, and the fact that the Academy has now overlooked him twice for both Dune movies, it's just, I don't get it. I really don't understand. And even this year, I don't think that you could look at his competition and say like, well, but those 5 easily should have been in over him. I mean, I guess it just comes back down to the Emilia Pérez of it all for me. I don't look at those 2 movies and look at Jacques Audiard's work and look at Denis Villeneuve's work and say like, well, easily Jacques Audiard should have been in over Villeneuve. It's just the Academy this year in particular, and I don't mean to pick specifically, well, maybe I do a little bit, on Emilia Pérez, but the fact that they put it in so many categories when I think that there was so much work by so many other films that should have been in, or at least considered, it seems like the Academy just went through and like checked the box next to Emilia Pérez's name in so many categories, and they just decided to come up with the 4 other nominees. And I think that really, you don't see that more than in the nominations for Best Director here. And then we have the big one, Best Picture. The 10 nominees are Anora, The Brutalist, A Complete Unknown, Conclave, Dune Part 2, Emilia Pérez, I'm Still Here, Nickel Boys, The Substance, and Wicked. I am very happy that Dune Part 2 made the cut. Maybe it was the doomer in me that was saying that it wasn't going to. I thought that it would be overlooked. The biggest surprise for me is I'm Still Here making the Best Picture cut. I'm happy to see it in the category because I think it's a really, really good movie. A24, and I mentioned this earlier, really fumbled the ball on Sing Sing. They tried to put it back out in theaters last weekend after the nominations had already been delayed. It wouldn't have made a difference if they put it back in theaters last weekend, or I think 2 or 3 weekends ago. It was too little too late. I don't know what they were thinking with the awards campaign for this film. But Sing Sing not making the Best Picture cut and also not making the cut in Best Supporting Actor and other categories is really emblematic of what I think was a fumbled awards campaign for the movie. September 5 is another movie that I predicted at least, to be in the Best Picture conversation, and that was considered to be a leading contender that didn't really pan out too much at the Academy Awards. And I have to look at the strategy there from Paramount as well, and how they positioned that movie, because it was under the radar for so long that it seems like it never really made the radar. Of the movies that were on the bubble, I'm a little surprised that Nickel Boys was the one that made the cut, to be quite honest. I went 7 out of 10 on my personal predictions. I predicted that Sing Sing, A Real Pain, and September 5 would make the final list. Instead, Dune Part 2, I'm Still Here, and Nickel Boys made it, although I can't really argue with the inclusion or exclusion of those 3 in favor of the other 3. So those are the big 6 categories. Let's look at the other categories for the Academy Awards, except for the short film categories, only because I don't really know anything about any of those nominees and who should be in and who should be out. Normally, and this year's no different, I will wait for the nominations to come out and then go out and seek out those nominees, and hopefully they'll be in theaters as well. And then usually I'll do my own video about the short films. So excluding the shorts, let's look at the other nominations. First of all, we have the nominees for Best Adapted Screenplay, A Complete Unknown, Conclave, Emilia Pérez, Nickel Boys, and Sing Sing made the cut. One of the categories where Sing Sing was able to make it into the list. And I think that there's really no surprises here, no notable exclusions or movies that were expected to make it. Looking at the original screenplay category, Anora, The Brutalist, A Real Pain, September 5, and The Substance were the 5 nominees. Challengers did not make the cut in this category, nor did Hard Truths. Many people thought that those 2 films were real contenders, and Challengers in general, I'll talk about it at the end, received no Academy Award nominations in any category, which really surprised me because I thought that it could at least make it in for the music, maybe for Best Original Song, but Challengers was completely shut out at the Oscars, and I think that there should have been room for it in at least one category. In the Best International Feature race, we have I'm Still Here from Brazil, The Girl with the Needle from Denmark, Emilia Pérez from France, The Seed of the Sacred Fig from Germany, and Flow, the animated film from Latvia that's really started to coalesce a fan base, especially online. I see a lot of comments about Flow. Had India submitted All We Imagine Is Light, it would have been on this list, I'm sure, but it didn't make the cut because India didn't submit it. Kneecap was not nominated in this category. It's a film from Ireland that premiered at the Sundance Film Festival last year. It's a movie that I really liked, and many people had it as an odds-on favorite to be in that final 5, but it did not make the cut. It seems like The Girl with the Needle from Denmark took what would have been Kneecap's spot, but I think this is a pretty strong field of contenders here. Some really strong movies that unfortunately I think are all going to be bulldozed by Emilia Pérez, which it seems like it's just a fait accompli that it's going to win in this category. You never know though. Pan's Labyrinth many years ago got a lot of Oscar nominations in other categories, but did not win this award in favor of The Lives of Others from Germany. In the Best Animated Feature Film category, the nominees were Flow, Inside Out 2, Memoir of a Snail, Wallace and Gromit, Most Foul, and The Wild Robot. Having seen all of these, I can't really argue with these being the 5 nominees. It is interesting with Moana 2 not being nominated that Disney Animation, which pretty much invented feature animation, didn't make the cut, but I think that it was several grades below the quality of these films. And I think this is another really strong category, and also one where I don't necessarily know if there is a solid frontrunner. The nominees for Best Costume Design were A Complete Unknown, Conclave, Gladiator 2, Nosferatu, and Wicked. I'm a little surprised that Dune Part 2 is not on this list, but again, Dune Part 2 is excluded from a lot of lists where I thought it should have been. The nominees for Best Makeup and Hairstyling were A Different Man, Emilia Pérez, Nosferatu, The Substance, and Wicked. And honestly, when I was watching the award nominations this morning, this is when I sensed an Emilia Pérez sweep. Because when you look at that movie and realize that it made the cut over movies like Dune Part 2, again, The Apprentice, Beetlejuice, they were all shortlisted on the makeup and hairstyling list, and yet Emilia Pérez makes it in. That to me indicated that the Academy was really putting the rubber stamp on that movie. The nominees for Best Original Score were The Brutalist, Conclave, Emilia Pérez, Wicked, and The Wild Robot. I was surprised that Challengers did not make the cut here. I thought that that was a fantastic score. And Wicked making the cut, I don't necessarily have a problem with the music from Wicked, but the Oscar rules are so weird because Wicked, I'm sure the score is tied in with themes that already existed for the musical, yet at the same time, Dune Part 2 was deemed ineligible for this list because its score used some of the themes from the original movie. So I guess if you use existing music from a stage play, it's okay. But if you use existing music from another movie, then it's not okay. I don't know what the rules are here. The big thing for me, though, is the exclusion of Challengers. Again, I'm not going to single out Emilia Pérez this time, but but the fact that it did not make the cut speaks to a bigger thing here, which to me was a lack of imagination on the Academy's part when there were so many categories where you could reach out and bring in a movie that maybe didn't get nominated anywhere else to recognize the work in it. The Academy chose, in most cases, to not do that. The nominees for Best Original Song were El Mal from Emilia Pérez, The Journey from the 6888 because Diane Warren must be sated every year, Like a Bird from Sing Sing, Mi Camino also from Emilia Pérez, and Never Too Late from the Elton John documentary Elton John, Never Too Late. Again, Challengers excluded from this list, even though I like that song a lot. Also, Kiss the Sky from Wild Robot not making the cut. It seems like Elton John came in and was able to grab that nomination. To be perfectly honest, given this list of nominees, I'm all right with this being the year where the Oscar telecast does away with the performances for the Best Original Song nominees, which was announced yesterday that we're not going to do that this year. Now, if the Penis Vagina song had been nominated from Emilia Pérez, then I would have been upset that we didn't see the chance to see that on live worldwide television. But absent that circumstance, I'm kind of okay with not watching the performances for these songs. For Best Documentary Feature Film, the nominees were Black Box Diaries, which was a really good documentary that debuted at Sundance last year, No Other Land, Porcelain War, Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat, and Sugarcane. This was a really, really strong list of contenders this year. Daughters, Dahomey, and Will and Harper are three lead contenders that didn't make the cut just because it was so strong this year. No Other Land, notably, is a documentary that is still seeking U.S. distribution. It debuted almost a year ago at the Berlin Film Festival, but seemingly because the movie is about a Palestinian activist and an Israeli journalist, it's set in Gaza during the conflict over there, it seems like no U.S. distributors were willing to pick it up because it is a very controversial subject matter. Maybe this Academy Award nomination will be able to secure it some sort of distribution, because right now, apart, I think, from some small screenings that are being set up in New York and Los Angeles, there's really no way that I or anybody else can see this movie because it does not have distribution here in the US. In some other countries around the world, it does. But hopefully this will spur somebody to take on distribution for the film, because just if you want to look solely at the fact that it's an Academy Award nominee for Best Documentary, it should be out there and available for people to see and look at with the other nominees. For Best Production Design, the nominees were The Brutalist, Conclave, Dune Part 2, Nosferatu, and Wicked. Again, that's a pretty solid list. Not much to quibble with there. For Film Editing, the nominees were Anora, The Brutalist, Conclave, Emilia Pérez, and Wicked. Challengers not being here is crazy to me. Dune Part 2 also not in the Best Editing category. Again, I don't want to single out one nominee, but Emilia Pérez there, just looking at it compared to the other movies, I don't get how they chose that one over the other potential choices there. For Best Sound, the nominees were A Complete Unknown, Dune Part 2, Emilia Pérez, Wicked, and The Wild Robot. I'll focus on the positive here. It's nice to see that an animated film made the cut here for Best Sound, because sound is so crucial in animation, and you often don't see those movies in this category, so it's nice to see The Wild Robot in the Best Sound category. For Best Visual Effects, the nominees are Alien Romulus. Kind of surprising that it made the final five, not because the effects were bad, I just thought that there were some bigger movies that might take its place. Better Man, Dune Part 2, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and Wicked. I think that's a pretty strong lineup there. And for Best Cinematography, the nominees were The Brutalist, Dune Part 2, Emilia Pérez, Maria, which is the only nomination that film got, and Nosferatu. I was very happy to see Nosferatu get the nomination. Conclave, not on this list, and Nickel Boys, for me, is the most surprising exclusion. I was not as high on Nickel Boys as a lot of people, but the cinematography for me was easily the best part of the movie, and yet it is left out in favor of the other nominees, including Emilia Pérez. Breaking down the movies with the most nominations, as I mentioned before, Emilia Pérez had 13. Wicked and The Brutalist both tied for second with 10 nominations apiece. Conclave and A Complete Unknown both came in with 8 nominations. Anora came in with 6, and then Dune Part 2 and The Substance came in with 5 apiece. Some notable films that received no nominations include Challengers, which I've already mentioned, The Piano Lesson, which was considered to be a contender in a few different categories, Hard Truths, Marianne Jean-Baptiste in particular was considered a possibility, as well as for the film in the screenplay category. Baby Girl, and Nicole Kidman, many people thought would be at least in the Best Actress race. Blitz, which was considered to be a contender when it was first released back in the fall. The Last Showgirl was not able to make that push to any nominations. And then just for notability here, Joker Folie à Deux went from 11 nominations for the first film to 0 for this one. Yet another sign of the catastrophic tumble from grace between Joker and Joker Folie à Deux. So looking at the overall storyline of the Academy Awards, I think the big story here is Emilia Pérez and the fact that it got 13 nominations. And not just that it got 13 nominations, but that it got 13 nominations at what is so far, I think, the height of the backlash against the film. And I don't think that the backlash against Emilia Pérez is the same as we often see. A lot of times with the leading contender, there will be a backlash that's sort of manufactured. This is not kind of something that feels like it's coming from the industry out. It's actually coming outside towards the industry. There are people from the trans community who have said that they're not happy with representation in the film. There are people from Mexico who have said that they're not happy with the representation of Mexico in the film. It is not a critical favorite on the level of almost every other Best Picture nominee. And it's also not a favorite of a lot of the online cinephiles. Letterboxd, not a fan of this movie. It seems like, and I've been saying this for the past several weeks now, that the only enthusiasm, or at least the biggest enthusiasm from this movie, is in the awards voting bodies and pretty much nobody else. And if they should end up giving Best Picture to Emilia Pérez, unless the narrative changes and the backlash dies down or people go back and reevaluate it, this would be like them giving the Oscar to Crash when they already know how people are going to react if you give the Best Picture Oscar to Crash. So that's going to be, for me, the narrative that's interesting to track over the next month plus before the Academy Awards. What is the discussion around Emilia Pérez? Does the backlash grow? Are there going to be other voices that come up in defense of it? And will voters start to hedge their bets a little bit? I don't think it's a good thing for the Academy. I haven't seen a lot of the discourse because I jumped right from watching the nominations to putting together all this info to recording to editing this video. But I can guess what the online discourse is right now and what people are talking the most about. And if you're the Oscars, I don't think that you want people to be talking more about a movie that you shouldn't have given as many awards to or nominations to as one that they are excited about the Academy nominating. Now, the discussion often is about who's left out when we talk about the Academy Awards on nomination morning, but it's not necessarily always about anger over who's left in. So we will see. I think it's going to be a very interesting award season in the weeks to come. Of course, you can stay tuned right here for more coverage on the Academy Awards and the Academy Awards themselves, plus movie news and reviews and box office and everything we do here on the channel. Thanks so much for watching my breakdown and analysis of the Oscar nominations. What did you think? Let me know down in the comments below. Thanks for tuning in this morning and watching this video. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.